So Kirby Smart was talking about motivation and what happens when you lose essentially the final game. Now that's not happened a lot at Georgia that they've lost the final game and they played on. So in 16 obviously that happened. That was the beginning of the season. Their terminal game in 17 was the national championship game. In 18 it was the SEC championship game, and obviously you saw the game after that. In 2019, it was the SEC championship game, and you saw the game after that, which was the Sugar Bowl, where they did the complete opposite of the year before the Sugar Bowl. In 2020, Georgia was able to turn the page after just a nasty loss to Florida. And since that night in Jacksonville, Georgia's lost one game, and they haven't had a terminal game, a game that would have eliminated them completely since that time. But when Kirby was on with Paul last week at the golf thingamabob, I don't really know what it is, the regions. Um, he said Kirby was talking about in a 14 playoff, one game and you're done. Basically, if you lose the wrong game, you are done. And I think that what's so important about that. And he was saying, hey, how do you motivate after that? How do you get guys to pay attention to your message? Well, it seems to me like, generally speaking, Kirby does a really good job of that. Now, in 2018, they made some mistakes. Um, they lost to Alabama on the final play of the game in the championship game, and went to the Sugar Bowl and took guys who weren't sure if they were going to play or not, and all this stuff. And it's not a very famous story, but it's a story that I know is true. That a season later, if there was any doubt from players about if they were going to play or not, they were not going. They were not allowed to practice. I mean, it was just they weren't going. That was it. They were going with who they were going with. J.R. Reed didn't play. A captain of the team did not go to New Orleans for that game. I mean, that to me left me. I mean, 'cause he was so incredulous when I asked DeAndre Baker the year before if he was going to play in the Sugar Bowl. That, and a year later to do the same thing. I don't know if Kirby and them said to Jr., "Hey, you're not going if you're not playing, or you're not practicing enough." And I can't remember. I don't think Jr. got drafted. He played in the league for a while. He may still be in the league, but they basically cut all that out. And it wasn't just Jr. by the way. So the motivation of players after the terminal loss of the season is a challenging thing. I just, you know, I think about, when you don't get what you want and you won't get what you want, and what your day is like. For 20-year-old football players in college, what we've become so fascinated with the playoff, understandably so, that nothing else seems to matter. And games like the Sugar Bowl, when it's not a playoff game, they're just not important the way that they used to be, unfortunately. That will change, excuse me, with the 12-team playoff. But in the current status of football, I think that's one of the most challenging things for coaches, is keeping guys motivated when the season goals are gone. That's hard to do. That's been something that has been challenging for a long time in football. I think that has become even harder with the playoff. And I am all for the playoff, by the way, but I want to recognize how difficult it is. Hey, look, Double Dogs, today is the last day to sign up for the newsletter, to enter in to get your copy of Double Dogs for free. And the 5 folks that win it, today is the last day that you can sign up for our newsletter, which is down below, to get Double Dogs. The folks that get Double Dogs, those 5 people, they're also going to get the magazine free. You can get the magazine free whenever you purchase Double Dogs. The magazine is also available, but if you get Double Dogs, you will get the magazine for free. Okay, so take advantage right here. Everything's in stock. It's going out the window. It's going out the window. It's going out the door today. But today is the last day. Today is the last day that you can win. The 15th is if you don't sign up by midnight or 11:59 on Monday the 15th, you are not going to be eligible to get a free edition of Double Dogs. I'm giving 5 away, and they will come with the magazine. One last shot of that. So my nifty computer skills. So get that now. I think when there's been so few times that we've seen this with Kirby and them. In 16, I don't know when the terminal game was. Probably the Tennessee game, I guess, but certainly the Vanderbilt game. And then in 17, they played in the national championship game. 18, we talked about that already. 19, they did I would say, masterful job in 19 of shutting the door on the loss to LSU and moving forward. Their domination of Baylor that night was, I have to say, I think it might be one of the best wins of their time. It's probably the best win that no one talks about. That was a top 10 matchup, and they whipped Baylor's ass. I mean, Mitch or Joanna and what is the guy's name? The Gaines. I mean, those poor people were probably crying in the Superdome. It was so bad. Baylor couldn't do anything. Now, Georgia's offense had a hard time, but Georgia's offense was having a hard time the whole year. From the South Carolina game on, they couldn't score. I mean, the Vanderbilt game, they had a hard time scoring. So they dealt with that a season later. But then in 2020 was such a strange season in so many different ways. And at Georgia, I think this is going to sound very strange, but they're fortunate that was the COVID year because, you're starting 3 different quarterbacks in a season. They were just never cohesive that year until JT got in there. And his ability to throw was like a godsend. I mean, Stetson wasn't ready. Stetson was not ready for what he became. And this Stetson was there, the guy that could run away. But he was not quite ready for what was coming. And he needed to get better, and he did. And when you think about the terminal game of the season, Stetson Bennett's terminal game of his career was in Jacksonville, where he got hurt. And after that game, I would have taken any bet that he would have never played a meaningful snap again at Georgia. Had I known better JT Daniels' injury situations, I may have been, might not have been any amount of money, but a lot of money. And they, the crazy part about that time was that, against Mississippi State, Georgia just simply could not run the football. South Carolina was terrible. And Georgia just went over there the Saturday after Thanksgiving and absolutely thumped their skulls into the ground. And then the Missouri game, it was a relatively close game, but Mizzou couldn't score. So as soon as Georgia got up, I think 10 or 14 points, the game was basically over, and they just kept adding points. It looked like JT Daniels was an amazing quarterback. I think he's a very good thrower, but he's not in the same universe of Stetson Bennett in terms of being a quarterback. I think we can see that now, right? I mean, that's obvious. But think about Stetson's situation at that point, and that he had been passed over again as the starting quarterback at Georgia, or as a quarterback that played at all. You can learn a lot from Stetson Bennett. There's some things that you can learn not to do too, but there's a lot good about what Stetson did in his time at Georgia, and he had his terminal games, and yet he continued to push through. He is a great example of if you do the work, you will and your opportunity comes, you will have a great opportunity. If you do not work and your opportunity comes, you won't be ready. You won't be ready. And that's to me the biggest thing about like these terminal games. That Kirby's talking about. How do you motivate after that? I've never been a coach. I don't know. In basketball, our terminal games were always the last game of the season. So we didn't have this phenomenon of football where, you can lose a game and you got another 4 games to play and you're knocked out. If you are playing and there's still a conference tournament to be played, you can still win the national championship. So it's different for basketball, but in football, man, I mean, like that's a real thing. And I think they've done a pretty good job of dealing with losses. I think they've done a pretty good job of dealing with losses. The last time I think they lost back-to-back games was in 16. No, that's not true. They lost back-to-back in 18 from Alabama and Texas, and they that I'm telling you that Texas game, what they learned from that game was very valuable moving forward. Today's the last day for the sign up. Now get it done right now.